Adventure Ho Lumineers, and welcome back to another episode of Ducktail Dads. I am Ryan, joined by Mack and Nathaniel, all three together again. Thank goodness we're all healthy. How about that? We're excited to talk to you today. As all of you know, I'm sure, DLC Richmond just happened. So we're recording the Monday after the Sunday finals, and so we get to have some reactions and talk about everything that we saw over the weekend. We also had a couple of set champs experiences, so we have a lot to cover in this episode. So I hope your ears are turned on and ready to go. As we always do, we're going to start with what's new in your world. So Nathaniel, actually, let's start with Mack. We'll have Nathaniel wait. Mack, what's new in your world?
Yeah, my Lorcana one's pretty short. Mine was just watching the stream, really, and trying to hone in on my Sapphire Steel list. We'll dive a little bit into it when we get through the recap of DLC Richmond, but one did make it through the top 32. Very much exciting. But I'm just really excited to see that the meta is expanding as we have predicted and noticed the trends over the course of the last couple weeks. So that's the biggest Lorcana news that I have, besides just continuing to online playtest. Really, though, the other what's new in my world was non-Lorcana related. I officially have a 6-year-old now. His birthday was over the weekend. So it's crazy having 2 boys now that are just full, high energy, ready to go. He actually asked me today, he's like, Dad, I just feel like I've had a lot of presents recently. Like, you're not wrong, because you just had Christmas and birthday parties and whatnot. So he's like, I feel bad for my younger brother because he doesn't get to open as much as me. And I was like, well, during his birthday, he'll have a chance to open up those presents and he'll make up ground in that way. So it was kind of cute, though. He was looking after his little brother, and that was pretty awesome. But other than that, we had a lot of good family time, spending family fun, not only personally, just celebrating him, but then we had our family celebration too over the weekend as well. But on the off chance that I was watching the stream for DLC Richmond. So all in all, a lot of good fun over the course of the weekend for me. Nathaniel, how about you?
Definitely a super busy weekend for us. We started on Friday with the Vikings themed party, which was amazing. My oldest had a great time there celebrating his birthday. Did some sledding, of course, because you have to, even if it's sheer ice, which it was. So that didn't feel amazing. But we did it, and we had fun. The Vikings party was great. I think even the adults enjoyed the festivities there. Saturday we did our one of our family's Christmas celebrations. They just kind of do it post New Year's, and that was great. Love celebrating that with family. And then on Sunday, did the second set champs that I've done this season, and it definitely went better than the first one, so that was really cool. And so yeah, that kind of covers both areas, but definitely a packed weekend. Didn't necessarily feel like rest and recovery happened, but I will absolutely take it as a golden retriever. Ryan, what's new in your world?
Before we move on to me, Nathaniel, how well did the Sunday set champs go for you?
I was able to take home my second career set championship champion, Matt. That felt tremendous. It was almost a year since my Azurite C championship. So something about winter set champs, I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. But I was able to win, so that was really cool. I'll talk about it more, I'm sure, but that it does feel really cool. Yeah, I'm pretty happy about it. Ryan, what's new in your world?
I will say I'm just sad that none of us were able to be there with you to celebrate with you. I'm sure it was a blast anyways, and I'm sure you met and got to hang out with a lot of cool people at that set champs, as you always do, as the inherent golden retriever in you loves the social interaction. What's new in my world? I got to go to one set champs this weekend as well. That was fun to support the local store. Met a lot of people. We had a surprising number of people, I thought. We had over 20 players at this set championships on DLC weekend, so it seemed like just about anybody that was left over in Minnesota that didn't go to Richmond was showing up at this shop on Saturday. So that was fun to get out there in the community again, play some games, talk to a couple of people that listen to the podcast, which is always nice to talk to those listeners, those friends, and those new acquaintances as well. So saw some really great play, saw some really great lists, got to try out a new list, a new ink color combination that I haven't really played in person before much, but it was still a great time, and created the type of puzzles that we like to see, and the type of puzzles we're looking for when we're playing Lorcana live against other people, and just trying to solve different board states and figure out ways to get across the finish line. Which I played Ruby Amethyst, and so there are plenty of ways for that deck to get across the finish line very quickly. They have a lot of lore pips on those character cards, that's for sure. So yeah, it was a good time. It was a fun deck to play. I ended up getting a top 8 finish, so got to get a nice shiny promo card. And that's really the goal. Every time you show up at one of these is really just to try to get a top cut and make it home with a promo card. On the personal front, we've been battling some sleep challenges recently, so hopefully tonight goes much better than the last couple of nights. But our youngest is going through some sleeping challenges, so we are relatively sleep deprived in this household at the moment, and we're gonna make it through it, and we'll have more restful days ahead, I am sure. Everything evens out in time, and that's just the way it is. That's just how it goes. Otherwise, I was trying to keep track of DLC Richmond as it was happening, and kudos to you, Mack. Thank you as well for keeping us all abreast of the information and of the results as they were coming through, as you saw them on stream or on PlayHub while you were following along. So thank you for keeping us all informed in our group chat, so I could follow vicariously through you when I was not able to watch the stream, and then I was able to tune in for a couple of games, I think, on Sunday as some downtime arose. But otherwise, nothing major. We did go to I guess one other thing on the personal front, we did go to my nephew's birthday party on Sunday, so that was always fun to spend time with family and celebrate birthdays. It's a busy birthday weekend all around in the Ducktail Dads crew. Wow, holy cannoli. But let's get to DLC Richmond, how about? Or set champs. Mack, what do you want to talk about next? I'll give the floor to you.
I'm kind of like curious, since you guys already kind of had your toes dip in on your set champs experience, might as well continue that, because you guys both ran kind of new decks, and you ran basically the same deck together at your own separate set champs. So Ryan, I think it was the first time you alluded to as a Ruby Amethyst, but I remember Nathaniel, before you started diving into Purple Steel way back when, your first love was actually Ruby Amethyst. So how was it getting back to this ink combination? I know it's very different than what it ran before, or maybe you can explain some similarities and differences between the two, but how did it feel going back? But we couldn't get you away from purple, but at least you're latching on to one of my favorite colors in Ruby for sure.
Yeah, so it's definitely super different, and I think maybe call it to action for us to maybe in the near future do another ink series, because the inks have changed for sure, and the important cards have definitely changed within those ink colors as well. And Ruby, we've talked about having not been the best ink since rotation. It used to be the big board wipe stuff. You typically paired it with a ramp color like Sapphire, so you could get to all that great removal and big strong characters more quickly. And now we're in this kind of funky spot where there is some removal with some of the newer cards, like the Headless Horseman, the 5-cost uninkable legendary. It's an extremely good card. So that's still kind of in the vein of Ruby, but the direction it's kind of gone in these Ruby Amethyst decks is a little bit more of an aggressive deck. It's not like full-blown aggro, but you do see a lot of, as Ryan mentioned, 2 lore pips on a lot of these characters. So the Horseman, 2 pips. The reprinted Sisu, that's a 3-cost inkable, 2 lore pips. The new Diablo, that is a 3/3, 2-cost uninkable, quest for 2. So if you're catching my drift here, there's a lot of 2-questers. So when you're on the play, you're like, boom, really fast, which, I definitely don't mind. So it's actually funny, Mac, that you mentioned this, because it was in a week, it'll have been exactly 1 year since I ran Ruby Amethyst at a set champs with Ryan at his first set champs. And after that experience, it was a really big control deck, and I got run over by some aggressive decks, and I was like, I don't know if I like this, and Purple Steel caught my attention. But one of the things I think I'll talk about 2 of the matchups that I had in my experience, and I think one of the biggest things I've observed as a difference from the current state of some of these Ruby Amethyst decks, and particularly the one that both Ryan and I essentially ran this weekend, as it differs from something like a Purple Steel, which I've been really used to, or Amethyst Steel. And it's really about that ability to go fast I still think there's plenty of ways that you can do that. You can build an Amethyst Steel deck that can quest pretty quickly if you want, but you sometimes have to trade off when you're doing that. So for example, the 2 cards I typically call out when I'm thinking about building a faster Amethyst Steel deck in set 10 for Whispers. You would be putting in Timothy O. Mouse, aka Timothée Chalamet, or and his partner, the 3-cost evasive Tinkerbell. She's a 1/3 quest for 2. So she's basically the same version of like the 1/3 Peter Pan from Ruby, but it's an Amethyst card. So yes, those are really great cards and they can quest for 2, but they're really weak, right? Like if you're on the draw, those cards are not going to help you like fight back very well. So that's kind of what you're giving up when you're opting for these higher questers. And sure, you still have the ability to do fast things, like you can burn your hand out using Cobras and gain instant lore that way, or you could put in cards like Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom. You can certainly make a fast Amethyst Steel deck, but it usually comes with the cost that I'm kind of referencing of like weakening your ability to like battle for board control. What I found with Ruby Amethyst, and again, this is one singular set, champs. It's not like I've played this for months, but the cards inherently are bigger bodied and still having 2 lore pips on them. So if you're on the play, you can just quest and make them trade into your big stuff, usually throwing in 1, maybe even have to throw 2 characters into your stuff, which you're going, okay, great, that's pretty good for me. Or if you need to have your 2-cost Diablo, that's a 3/3 body, quest for 2. If you need to have him challenge, he can still do that, right? And probably survive in that early game against some of those lower willpower characters and still probably do like a 2-for-1 trade. You're probably feeling pretty fine about that when you're on the draw. So what I mean to say is it feels like it has this ability to go fast when you need to if you're playing a bigger control deck, and it can play the role of managing the board against a smaller, faster, aggressive deck. So the two examples I think that I'll call out that I saw, and again, I want to also call out the fact that the Minnesota meta is clearly so different than these big tournaments. Like, it's crazy. There was 1 Blurple list. I think there was 0 Amethyst Steel in this tournament. Like, that's crazy, right? Like, those colors are representing 35 to 40% or more of most of these big tournaments that we've been seeing, basically since Fabled. So for the last 5 months. So I think that's really interesting. Or 4 months maybe, whatever. It's just interesting to me because it's very different, like with a local meta, right? And this also happened to be the weekend of a DLC, so it even more different, right? Because some of the more seasoned players were off contending for a DLC, versus a set championships. But I'll call out 2 matches in particular that I think were really fun. And one of those was a Ruby Amethyst mirror. So I was on the draw, lost game 1, won game 2, and then got into game 3. And I think that this is where I think there is some degree of skill expression with Lorcana when you're... Because game 1, you're like in this blind situation. You don't really know what you're playing, and by the time you get to game 3, you kind of have some information to kind of go, okay, what's my mulligan strategy? What am I going to go for now? And my MVP cards in this case were that Horseman, the Headless Horseman, legendary card is extremely good. And then the card that I wasn't totally convinced when I first kind of started testing this, but it's the Shift Mulan that's been around forever. And this is the legendary 2/6 Floodborn Mulan that was reprinted as part of Fabled. And if you shift her on that turn, she gets +3 attack or strength. And if she banishes someone, you get to deal that much damage, or maybe she's just challenge. You get to deal that much damage to 2 other characters. I'm saying banishes because usually 5 is going to be enough to banish whatever you're challenging. And so I did get to like do the thing with that once, right? And basically take out 3 characters in one challenge with that shift. Which, if you think about the state of Lorcana right now from like a board perspective, because of how few board wipes there are, that's usually pretty crippling. And that was a big play for me that I was able to make happen, and that felt cool in the second game. And then in the final, and I kind of talked about this with you guys kind of a little bit before we started recording, but I played Amber Steel, and actually Amber Steel is the color combination that knocked me out of DLC Milwaukee when I was on Amethyst Steel. And Ruby Amethyst, I think, into a more aggressive Amber Steel deck. If you don't brick and not bricking in the current state of a Ruby Amethyst build is basically like, just make sure you can like play a character on 1, play a character on 2, play a character on 3, and then you're probably fine, right? But you just have such big characters, right? Like your Sisu comes out and she's a 1/4 +1 for every card they have in hand. She's like a 5/4 when you play her, which is just like, come on 3. And so that's just so much strength, right? That like you're just questing, and Amber Steel has a really hard time challenging into that. So that felt like a really good matchup for me, and I think it felt more comfortable than I have in the past. Like, it's a good matchup for Amethyst Steel, but I don't think it's as good as potentially Ruby Amethyst can be, because it's just even bigger strength characters to kind of get around things like the Tiana restaurant owner, stuff like that. So the shadows that I wanted to make were the Love and Lorcana crew was there. So Jenna, Ron, and Brenna were all 3 of them were there. That was really cool to see them. If you haven't checked out Love and Lorcana, they do pack battles, rips. They stream games. They're just a really fun channel. You can find them on TikTok. They are just some really cool people, and they traveled up to the Twin Cities to play in this set champs, and that was really cool to see them. And the host of the set champs that I attended was Bunker Gaming in Ramsey. So shouts to them. It was really fun, and it was like a late afternoon nighttime set champs, which was kind of unique as well. So that was it. And to watch out for Ruby Amethyst at the local level, because it seems like it didn't really do that well at the DLC. Sadly.
I think there was one list that made top 64 maybe for Ruby Amethyst, maybe 2 lists that made top 64, so it still had some legs on the national level, but I think you're absolutely right that Ruby Amethyst eats every aggro deck for breakfast, lunch, and dinner twice a day, every day. So it's unreal how large the stats on those characters are, and how early those characters come down, and how fast you can end a game if you have like one board swing, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm questing for 10 next turn. Great, sweet, and I'll be done in 2 turns. Headless Horseman is definitely an MVP in that deck. Just banishing a character, and not even that, even just having that aura effect of the secondary text of every time a character is banished, every time one of your opponent's characters is banished during your turn, each of your characters gains +1 strength. So now like Headless Horseman gets played, and now he has 5 strength, and everything else is boosted as well. So then if you just have a Headless Horseman aura, and then you play a Demona next turn, and then you take some trades on the opponent's board, you can do some crazy math things. One of the board states I was like stuck on that I faced over the weekend, I was playing against an Emerald Sapphire deck, blue-green, and they had something along the lines of, I think they might have had 2 Shere Khans of the green evasive 5/4 quest for 2, and then deal damage and banish a damaged character, those type of things. And then there's also a Prince Philip, and there was one other like smaller, a 3/3, I think it was a Bellwether, that puts a damage counter on everything when it gets banished. And I think I had 1 Horseman, and I had a handful of other things out there. But at the end of the turn, I was able to finish my turn with like a single Headless Horseman remaining, and clearing all of that through challenging. I got an Elsa. I played an Elsa, and that Elsa got up to 6 strength because of, I think I had a Lumiere on board too, maybe. And it was just like ludicrous, the math, the strength math that was able to happen because of the sequence of challenges that was able to take place. It was unreal. It was so cool to see. So that's definitely an MVP. The other MVP obviously is Demona. It's what the whole, like the entire deck is built around, that one single card of just dumping your hand, refilling your hand, forcing, and then taking largely incredibly favorable trades on the board as you're surprising your opponent. And then the other MVP for me, I would say, is probably Hercules. The 4-cost uninkable 5/3 quest for 2. Cannot be dealt damage except when being challenged, and so when it challenges into something else, it does not take damage, which is just crazy. And then when Hercules is exerted, all of your other hero characters also gain that same effect, or they cannot be dealt damage unless being challenged. So Sisu gets protected from damage, Dumbo gets protected from damage, Elsa gets protected from damage, a 2-cost inkable evasive Vanellope it gets protected from damage. It just doesn't seem fair when you're playing, like, if you curve like Vanellope into Sisu into Hercules into Elsa, and then you get free trades, and then you get a Demona out, and you're refilling your hand, and you're taking free, like, 0 damage in trades in challenges on the way back on that turn too. It's just the board state swings are crazy. I think Hercules cleared Hades in one swing. He cleared other opposing Demonas in one swing. He cleared John Silver's. He cleared like just everything that was possible was just taking favorable trades, and so that just creates these like asymmetrical board states where you have tons of 2-questers and they have no 2-questers and nothing left on board because you've challenged everything down. Ultimately, I lost to an Amethyst Steel. I think I wasn't prioritizing my evasives quite highly enough, and so I got out evasived in I think all 3 games that we played. I was able to just kind of aggro out in game 1, and then game 3 I just kind of bricked I think I bricked pretty hard. I don't remember quite exactly the details, but it was my opponent played it phenomenally. They played around any Demonas that I was telegraphing. They drew extra cards with Dumbos that were just sitting on field because I couldn't get to them. And they had Genies and Dumbos and Elsas and Iagos, and it's just like, oh my goodness, this is an onslaught. I can't keep up with all of this. So yeah, it was a great time. Always a great time to go out and play some games. That Ruby Amethyst list is good. I didn't actually get to pull off a Mulan because I think everyone was playing around it. At one point, I was playing against a Amethyst Sapphire or Blurple list, and I played I had 2 or 3 other characters out, and to finish my turn, just to use up my ink, I played out a wounded or a 1-cost Mulan, and they're like, "Ooh, that can't stick around. Hades on your Mulan." I was like, "Wait, but what about the genie that's right next to it? Are you kidding me? Oh, that's a lot of respect for that Mulan shift. Wow, that's crazy." So that was fun. It was always fun to get out there in the community and play with other people. Play against other people rather than just playing against a computer or other people online. It was a blast. Yeah. It's a good list. Yeah. I'm excited to see how it evolves, as I think Ruby's probably going to get a little more firepower here in the next couple of sets as they're building back up to the control mentality or the pseudo control mentality that is Ruby.
Ryan, I'm glad you brought up. I'm really glad you brought up the wounded Mulan, which is the shift target for the big Mulan. It actually gets a ton of attention. And I think one of the things that this Ruby Amethyst list actually thrives on is there's just a lot of different types of threats that sort of are in some ways distractions, or you can kind of bluff things differently too. They have to wonder, do you have that shift line? Which imagine, right, a 1-cost 2/3 with 2 damage already on it card that could potentially freeze a large portion of a board because they don't want to get hit by that shift, right? That's the power of that card, is just kind of the mental piece there. And it's kind of crazy that it has that. And I think this deck also thrives on there is some, you could kind of look at it 2 ways. Does Hades, the 5-cost Amethyst Hades, does it kind of clog up your ability to play Demona perfectly, where you're down to 0, play it, refill? But there's play lines where you can be you could play that and they could be okay, you only have 1 card left. I'll bottom deck my most important thing that you just targeted. And then the next turn you play Demona, and it's ooh, that's really bad for them now. Because now they've let the board state get even more favorable to you. And then once they start to play more threats, you just exert them all and then refilled anyways. So it kind of gets this not only do you have all these favorable trades in big bodies, but you can do these kind of hard mental things for your opponent to think what do they have there versus I guess in the past, usually Amethyst Steel, it kind of feels relatively you kind of know what I'm trying to do here, right? I want to do 1, 2, 3, play a Genie, sing Strength, right? That's the thing. So I think for that reason, right, it's kind of fun because you get these multifaceted threats within the deck beyond just having big bodies that can, all of them seem to quest for 2. So yeah, I suppose we should probably talk about the DLC though, because that is kind of the big news. Probably first and foremost, we got to shout out our guy, Scott Markson, right?
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, the People's Champion here in Minnesota, Scott Markinson, our world's representative from Season 1. He made top 16, and I know top 32 get an invite to Continentals or the North American Championships. And I know in talking with him in Milwaukee, that was his main goal over the course of, especially Milwaukee, but when he wasn't able to achieve that, he was I forget what place he was, but he was around 70th place. He just missed out on the top 64 cut to hopefully get a chance to get there. he just bubbled out, and I know that was a big goal of his, was to make it to Continentals and have another chance to make it to Worlds again. So congratulations first and foremost to Scott. We now have 2 local Minnesota representatives who will be attending the North American Championships. The other one was Tyler Novak, who we have not had on the pod, and we have not really discussed very much on the pod before, but he absolutely wiped the floor in Milwaukee with his dogs list, and I think he made it all the way to top 8. So he got his Continental invite in Milwaukee, and Scott now joins him for the Minnesota representatives. We had a lot of people very close to the quote-unquote win and in stage to get to day 2. I think overall the Minnesota community did very well in Richmond, so congratulations to all of you. But yeah, shout out Scott. Well done. I think he and a couple other Minnesota group brewed a Emerald Amethyst deck that didn't perform very well overall because it's a high skill-based deck from what I've been learning. But if you're able to achieve that mastery of that deck is very, very, very effective. And he was a part of the group that obviously did that. So congratulations, Scott. I'm excited to have 2 Minnesota representatives at the Continentals and hopefully another one make it to Worlds. But it was fun to watch. I know he was on stream, and I was updating you guys, to your point, Ryan, earlier. I was updating you guys on his records, and I was like, oh, Scott's 6-0, Scott's 7-0, he's 8-0, he's doing really well. Odds are he's making it today or going to make the top cut based on how he's performing. And he made it on stream. It was fun to watch him then. I will say the one drawback from the DLC experience is that I think what they learned from Milwaukee is that the stream in Milwaukee was like truly live. Like you could pull it up on your phone and the featured table was live. And I think I don't think anything bad happened by any means in Milwaukee. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I think kind of the feedback that they had received for competitive integrity's sake was to delay the stream in Richmond. So if you were following on PlayHub, it was, I don't know, like 1.5 to 2 rounds ahead of where the stream was. So I was following Scott. Oh, great job. He was on round 10 and he won. And then you tune in 2 hours later to the stream and Scott was on stream for his round 10 matchup, but you already know how he did if you were following truly online on PlayHub. So that was kind of like the only dang, I wish it was more live where you could experience that in real time. But I do understand the competitive integrity side of things with that. So I think it's more so I appreciate that side of it, that they wanted to make sure it was the most fair competition that they could provide for the players that performed there. Just as a viewer, I know a lot of people still enjoyed the stream, and probably a lot of people didn't follow on PlayHub. So for them, it was live, real time. But it was fun seeing Scott, and after, even though I knew the results, watching him on the stream, and congratulations to him. Anything else for the Minnesota love?
I think one more. We had talked earlier this season about really enjoying the trio event that was put on. And the organizer of that is a local named Rob, who went 7-0 on the Sunday Infinity event. So that's obviously incredible. I don't know how many people actually end up going 7-0. I think it's very, very few. And so kudos to him for running Amber Steel aggro to perfection and getting a huge amount of tickets. So, I mean, Mack, you know what that's like, kind of. Not quite the 7-0, but pretty amazing for him to do that well on the heels of, while Scott is, getting top 16. So pretty amazing for both of those players.
And I just want to provide context, Nathaniel. I think it's only like a handful of people end up, like single digits end up 7-0 based on how the Swiss round ends. I don't know. I think in Milwaukee it was ended up 4 or 6 people ended up 7-0 at the end of the day. So it's a really tough task to complete. I would assume this around the same number of people participated in the Infinity event that Sunday in Richmond. Either way, that's a huge feat. So congrats, Rob.
Yeah, it's like 1 to 2%, right, of the field essentially gets that 7-0. So it's basically like making a top cut at a DLC, right? So yeah, kudos to him. And I think, so just for clarification, I believe Tyler Novak got top 16 at Milwaukee. So they both made top 16 now. Both, I think, were one match win away from Golden Mickey's this season, both Scott and Tyler. So bummer to not get that, but still amazing performances and still plenty of great prizing, and getting their invites to Continentals is going to be really fun to follow both of those players. So I think probably worth talking about green, because that actually was in a lot of decks, right? Emerald combinations seem to be catching on, right?
Yeah, I mean, Emerald seems to be the counter to Amethyst, right? Green versus purple is the stalwart matchup that we saw all weekend. Blue-green, Emerald Sapphire, Emerald Amethyst, combining them together against other Amethyst decks. Really trying to feast on those Amethyst decks that are trying to build wide board states and accrue incremental advantages, and take advantage of that by just board wiping them with the Malicious Mean and Scary and Prince Philip combination to reset the board and say, my cards are bigger than yours and I'm going to win now. Looking at the final list, the final match was a mirror of Emerald Sapphire versus Emerald Sapphire. So no matter what happened, you knew that Emerald Sapphire was going to win the tournament. And I think one trend that I sort of noticed throughout the tournament was that these like aggressive ramp decks can get so much ink so fast that even the aggressive lore gain decks, like what traditional aggro decks are, like Amber Emerald or Amber Steel, or even the Ruby Amethyst that we were talking about earlier, like they can't gain enough lore fast enough to beat the board wipe. And then once the first board wipe happens, there's a second board wipe behind it, or there's enough stall to get to the second board wipe, or there's enough card draw to get to the second board wipe. It's just they couldn't get under the deck fast enough. And maybe it was that those these specific Blue Emerald Sapphire decks protect against more of the mid-range, and that's what they saw more of. But I just think that the meta seemed to slow down just a little bit, just enough to allow these big ramp green decks to thrive. And looking at the two lists in the finals, there was a single card difference between those two lists. There were 59 of the same cards. One deck had 4 John Silvers and 2 Improvise, and one deck had 3 John Silvers and 3 Improvise. And otherwise, the rest of the deck was identical, which is fascinating to see that this was obviously a great list for the weekend, since it performed so admirably well. Yeah, I mean, what else can we say about Emerald Sapphire other than it's clearly the best deck in format now, and it'll probably all have to change when Winterspell comes around. Is blue-green really the big bad, and do we think we're going to see a ton of it at set championships now, fellas?
So, Ryan, can you just clarify one thing for me? Do those decks have the new Cinderella in them? Okay, because I think that cards...
Yes, both of the decks, the Emerald Sapphire decks, both include the Cinderella, and there's a lot of Cinderellas being played. I think the Sapphire Steel decks, whether they were running more of the like Jasmine Shift ally package, or if they were just doing 2-4-6, give me big bodies as fast as I can, both were running Cinderellas as well. A lot of Cinderellas, a lot of Cinderella triggers, and a lot of ink hitting the table this weekend.
Yeah, because I think it's worth calling out, right? Like one of the biggest changes to blue decks, generally your Sapphire Steel and Emerald Sapphire decks, right? That the tool that they got access to this set is that Cinderella legendary card that released in Whispers, and it's definitely one of the more rare, sought after, pricier cards for sure. And the reason why, right, is because of that ability being so powerful, right? So the exact text, right, I think for people who aren't maybe as familiar with this card, it's a 4-cost uninkable, 2/3 body, quest for 1. But the ability says at the end of your turn, if you played a princess character this turn, you can ink a card to draw another card. So what that's really doing is a couple things. It's like helping you filter your hand, ramping you on ink, and you get a 4-cost body down. Like there's just so many benefits to that. And if you've ramped on turn 2, now you're also getting a body, filter, and ramp on turn 3. So that you can now play a 6-cost thing on turn 4. I think that's part of the other thing, right? Is like even if the meta doesn't slow down that much, that's just so early to have this huge character already coming down, right? Like you can just outright play a big Tink in the blue steel decks, sapphire steel decks. You're getting to board wipes crazy fast, right? If you're, running one of those sapphire emerald decks, where yes, you've got to probably find a turn to get the Phillip down, but then maybe on turn 5 you're doing the malicious, mean, and scary thing. I think what I'm really interested in, Mac, because you ran in set 9 Emerald Sapphire with the other version of the board wipe that was available to us, and that was the singing heads held high with something, and then Under the Sea to bottom deck their whole board. I'm curious why this seems to be so much better when it does rely on some specific, like, is Cinderella the big difference here? Or is, like, what's the biggest change now? Because Malicious, it's still like a 3-card combo, right? You still have to get the small Prince Phillip, the Malicious, Mean, Scary to put a damage on everything, and the big, 6 cost or 9 cost shifts for 6, big Prince Phillip to do the whole board wipe thing. Now, like, why does that seem so much more effective than maybe the set 9 one was?
I think in simplest terms, compared to set 9, Emerald Sapphire now relies much less on hitting Clarabelle shift. You don't necessarily have to hit the shift because you have this 2-4-6 play with the Cinderella. What I mean by that is before is you would run 4 copies of the 1-drop and either a minimum of 3, probably 4 copies of the 3-drop Clarabelle in order to have a higher probability to hit the shift when you have 5 ink. Now, I think all of these decks have removed the 3-cost Clarabelle because now the ideal play line is 1-cost Clarabelle into a turn 2 ramp, into a Cinderella that ramps you again, and then you're going into 6 ink where you can shift if you want, but also with 6 ink, you could play a tiny Prince Phillip and another small cost character. You could play a John Silver. There are a lot of good options for 6. It just feels a lot smoother and a lot less clunky than what the set 9 meta was, where you relied on specific player lines, specific cards. I think now, to what I think we've talked to about before, I think the most effective decks have more outs to play with, depending on what you draw. And not only the Cinderella, you play 4 Cinderellas or you play 4 of those Donald Duck Perfect Gentlemen. So if you don't have the Cinderella or if you don't have the Clarabelle shift, you can play that Donald Duck and you're drawing more cards in order to get that Clarabelle, right? So like the 4-cost slot for these Emerald Sapphire lists are either way. If you play one of those 2 cards, it's great. And even better, the 2 main songs you sing can be sung by those 4-cost characters in the You're Welcome or the Malicious, Mean, and Scary to set up the shift board wipe for the Prince Phillip. A lot of these ran 2 copies of Mother Knows Best just to slow down tempo, also to either benefit you by drawing more cards with Clarabelle, or just bouncing characters, again, slow tempo, or bouncing characters to set up a Bend to My Will. And that's been very effective too for a lot of these Emerald Sapphires. They run 1 copy of Bend to My Will, they bounce as many characters into your opponent's hand, and then they bend, and then you're top decking for the rest of the game, and it just feels bad. But to answer your question in a much shorter way, like, it just feels a lot less clunky. You have more definitive lines that you're trying to set up. And I don't know, you're less reliant on the Clarabelle shift, because even if you double ramp with the Cinderella, and you don't hit shift, you double ramp, so you're playing it on turn 5 anyways. So it's like you'll be okay if you don't hit the shift too. So once you get that Clarabelle out and to refill your hand, and you have more options to do so, then that's when you're drawing the Phillip combination that just ends up ultimately swinging the game in your favor. Something funny about the finals, because it was the mirror, the Emerald Sapphire, these are probably, I'm trying to think to recent memory, compared to all Sapphire, Ruby Sapphire decks, compared to all Sapphire Steel decks, Ruby Amethyst, in the history of Lorcana. I might be wrong on this, but this Emerald Sapphire is probably the slowest control deck to ever hit Lorcana. It's so slow. Because it's just a lot of bouncing. Once you get the board control, then you just quest to win, finally. But the fact that this mirror it's untimed. And I think the finals was nearly 2.5 hours. It was around the 2 hour mark. And this was the match that I ended up watching about 85% of it. Because the guy who ended up winning, I think his name's James, but he's a popular content creator. He's been playing this deck for sure the last 2 sets, but I think for probably 4 sets now. Ended up winning. Congratulations, Fungus. He was the guy that I followed in order to build my deck for Milwaukee. You could tell that he was so quick with this deck. He knew exactly what the play lines were. He knew exactly what he was looking for. He still played really fast, and it was still a 2-hour match. It was so slow. It was I enjoyed it, but I can imagine some aggro players just feeling painfully slow, how slow that match was. I was able to put my kids down to bed, and I put my kid down to bed, and it was still the same game, and it was 20 minutes had passed. So I'm like, yeah, it took a while, but it was fun overall. It was a really, really good match. What did any of you catch it or some of it, or were you just kind of checking in on highlights here and there?
I only got to watch the first couple of games. I didn't see the end of it. I think Fungus won the first 2 games, and I was like, oh, this is probably done. I don't need to watch the rest of this. Then I heard it went to 5 full games, and I was like, whoa, that went on a lot longer than I thought it was going to. So kudos to Sky. I think what his Lorcana handle is. For pulling back 2 more games and making it a full 5-game set for the Disney Lorcana Championship in Richmond.
And I thought that was crazy too with the finals, Ryan. 3 wins were on the draw, which is, we've talked about the play draw dependency and favorability. 3 wins were on the draw, so I thought that was really interesting. But this Emerald Sapphire deck, in my opinion, does very well, or it does well than most on the draw because of all the bounce mechanics that they have installing the game out. So it's not surprising to me, but it's still wild that 3 wins on the draw in the finals with how strong these players are. That was something that was interesting to see for sure, as I watched and observed and tried to learn as much as I can on what I did wrong in Milwaukee.
One thing that I will say is that when these games go on for forever, when you're getting up to 12, 15 ink, it doesn't really matter who goes first in those games, because it's never gonna, those first couple characters are never gonna stick the whole game. You both are gonna be at 10 or 11 ink before you know what happened, and it's really just who sees their ramp faster and who sees more of it and at the right time, right? It's all about timing of the right draws to be able to get board advantage, and then to maintain board advantage by hoping your opponent doesn't draw the perfect answer, which would be Malicious, Mean, and Scary and Prince Philip at the exact right time, which can happen if they have 12, 13 ink. They can just hardcast the Malicious, Mean, and Scary and play a Prince Philip and say, all right, now I have the board, go. So I'm not too surprised that on the draw, that there was wins on the draw, because this wasn't an aggro matchup versus a control deck. It wasn't a mid-range versus a control deck. It was control versus control, which in those type of matchups, in like a blue mirror, I've not seen play draw matter nearly as much as it does when you're playing Ruby Amethyst against something else, or aggro Amber Steel against something else. You're like, if I go first, this might be done in 2 minutes. So let me go first, and we can be out of here and get some lunch.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm also just observing about this particular list and just where Emerald Sapphire is right now is it also has, like I mentioned, right, like Ruby Amethyst has its own form of multifaceted challenges. This deck does really mean things where it's you want to dump your hand so they don't get Clarabelle value. But then if you do that, you get board wiped by the Phillip combo. So it's sort of darned if you do, darned if you don't. And then seeing that one of Bend to My Will is just scary, right? Because they can just keep stuffing your hand. And once they do that, if they have ink advantage, board advantage, and card advantage, or 2 of those 3 things, it's probably basically over. So I'll be honest, I'm kind of glad Bend to My Will is a set 6 card, meaning that it's not going to be here that much longer. Because being able to discard 8 is insane.
Yeah,
it's a good
and
card.
If you talk about it in simplest terms, Nathaniel, just because I don't know if you saw this with the finals, this was game 5. Okay, I'm going to set the stage. Game 5, Fungus is on the play. So And typically what you hear from a lot of these higher competitive players, especially in this mirror, it's whoever gets bent, bend to my will, loses, right? And that's kind of how it goes. Unless you are lucky enough to top deck a Clarabelle to then refill your hand based on what your opponent has, right? So game 5, Fungus, since he was on the play, was able to generate a significant amount of lore early, while Sky was trying to do the managing and trying to bounce the characters back and forth as much as he could. And Fungus got to this crazy lead of like 12-0 really quick. But Sky they were both sitting on 10 cards in hand because they kept drawing Clarabelles off of each other. Sky actually pulled off the bend. And so he discarded like 8 or 9 cards in Fungus's hand, and he discarded Fungus's bend. So like he couldn't do it back to him. And you could see how like visibly frustrated he was in the stream. And I mean, we're talking to a Lorcana community, so they all kind of know it. But like us Lorcana nerds, like when we were watching Worlds, we were watching the finals, like how intense watching the finals, like it had that vibe to it when I was observing it. And he was top decking. He couldn't find a Clarabelle. He was drawing Tipo. He was drawing Sail, and to a Tipo, he drew a Visions of the Future, which he then grabbed another Visions. He grabbed another Visions, and then he grabbed a Develop in order to try and find what he wanted. I imagine it was a Clarabelle to kind of refill his hand, and he couldn't find it. But eventually he got to the game where he was up to 18 lore, and he had 2 Tipos and some other very low-cost character. It might have been a little Clarabelle. I don't remember the final board state, but Sky was able to bounce one of those cards and could not remove one of the other Tipos because they were readied. And he didn't have a Malicious Mean and Scary combo. He didn't have another You're Welcome. So Fungus won at 18 lore by questing with 2 Tipos. That's how he won the finals at Game 5. So I thought that was incredible with no cards in hand. He was kind of just playing the Tipo train, and they quested him to victory. I think that game Tipo got him probably 7 or 8 lore total. Just this 2-cost ramp character that really his job is only to ramp, what he ended up stealing the finals, and he got the DLC win because of it. So it was a really fun matchup, and Sky was trying to find the answers, but in all the cards he was able to draw, he could not find that final bounce, which was you could see Sky was kind of smiling there at the end when he drew this final card and he knew that he couldn't get rid of both Tipos. He had that smirk on his face that he was just like, oh darn, I'm about to lose to 2 Tipos. But it was all in good fun. And Sky had already actually qualified for Continentals. He had won his previous CCQ. I think he won in Denver over the summer. So he already had a Continental invite. This was just kind of, now he had a Golden Mickey, right? Was his kind of perspective on it. Sure, he probably would have wanted the automatic Worlds invite. Still, it was a fun matchup, and you could tell that good sportsmanship all around too after the finals was done.
One card that I hope gets reprinted in the next rotation is Tipo, and I really hope they give him an enchanted simply because of this one moment that he gets engraved in Lorcana history as an enchanted card. In set 13, hopefully.
Or at least an epic, right? That's what they do for the uncommons.
Yeah, I mean, let's break precedent. Let's give him an enchanted. Give the growing boy growing son, right? Growing son, an enchanted.
Growing boy,
an enchanted for everybody to fit into their max rarity decks again, and really up the price on those things. I think that'd be great. He gets played in every blue deck, right? Think about the demand for that enchanted card. Oh, wouldn't that be incredible?
He would truly grow then.
Or hear me out. They don't reprint him, and instead they print a new card, and it's Tipo all grown up, and maybe he's like a 4-cost ramp character.
That you could join the development team after that one, Nathaniel. Good one. I do have one other thing to say about the top 32 specifically. We've been talking a lot about this blue-green deck, and the main thought was, yes, it seemed to kind of I don't want to say dominate the top 32, but it did very well, right? But the trend that I have noticed is, Blurple and Amethyst Steel are still very popular and very good decks. But when you're in the top 32 of a DLC, my opinion is, like, all these players are good, and either one of these players could take any one of those matches. So I would say, like, take the Emerald Sapphire with a grain of salt, and those longer rounds certainly help those decks too, at least towards the very end, because then they're not just rapid fire and potentially missing something. I think what's really nice is we saw the kind of the core four from Fabled with Amethyst Steel, Blurple, Dogs, and and then Emerald Sapphire. We saw Amber Steel Aggro kind of lose a lot of steam, but we saw new decks like a Sapphire Steel made into the top 32, Ruby Amethyst, Amethyst Emerald. So I want to make sure that people aren't just like saying like, oh, now I gotta max out everything that I can for Sapphire Emerald, otherwise I'm gonna lose out. Well, A, don't do that because the next set is about to release, so things are going to change anyways. But secondly, I think for me, it's encouraging to see, like, if you take a step back for the top 32, this is like the top 1% of, like, maybe even way less of that than the whole entire field. And there was a lot of variety there. And like I said, any one of these players could beat each other. It just so happened that moving through the later stages of the bracket, it just so happened that Emerald Sapphire was the one that we saw a lot more of towards the end, but we saw a lot of Blurple in previous DLCs, or we saw a lot of Amethyst Steel in other DLCs. So I think there's still a wide meta to be had here that I think suits a lot of people, which I think is great and very healthy for the game.
Mac, I think you bring up an incredible point there. The meta was super wide for this tournament. I think there's probably 8 or 10 different ink color combinations in the top cut, which is just fascinating to see, especially compared to where everything seemed to be at in Fabled, where it was really like a 3 or 4 deck maximum, maybe 5 were peripherally involved in the top cuts, but now we're at doubling that in just one set after the rotation, which is really great to see that clearly there's some intentional design changes happening to make things competitive and keep it fresh. I do want to point out, for the sake of talking about it, that there was an Emerald Amethyst hyper aggressive, like gain and lore as fast as possible deck that costs all of maybe $25 to compile all 60 cards in this deck. That I believe was the first seed coming out of the Swiss rounds, and nonetheless they made top 32. Awesome to see that there's this you have the slowest deck ever and also maybe the fastest deck ever potentially with the Emerald Amethyst hyper aggressive deck. I think plays 24, 28 one cost characters. There's only 2 cards, 10 cards that cost 3 ink, and everything else is less than that. And those 10 cards that cost 3 ink, 4 of them are Show Me More, which is going to draw cards. Is that a 3 cost or a 2 cost? I forget. 2 cost even. Oh, so there's only 6 cards that cost 3 ink. And there's 2 White Roses, and there are 4 They Never Come Backs in this specific list. Just to deal with any other illusion characters that are lurking around on the board looking to prey upon your small little wimpy characters. What do they call them, Nathaniel?
I believe we refer to those as the weenies.
Yes, that is correct. That's right. But yeah, just gaining lore from hand all over the place, gathering knowledge and wisdom. The Enigmatic Inkcaster, which is a new 2-cost uninkable item in Emerald that if you've played 2 cards this turn, you can exert that item to gain 1 lore, so just like free lore as you play your cards. I thought it was really cool to see a very affordable deck and a very aggressive deck doing so incredibly well at this major tournament, and earning an invite to NA Championships along the way, which was also stunning. I'm excited to see what this player cooks up for their next list. Hopefully it's just as aggressive to keep it just as fresh in the meta, but we'll see. I'm sure it'll be interesting no matter what, depending on how it goes. Thoughts on the $20 deck that made Top Cut?
It's kind of funny looking at this because this list reminds me in some ways of the very first Lorcana deck I had ever built, which was that really aggressive Ruby Emerald deck. And this has a lot more other tools to it for sure, and I give this player tons of credit, but it was a budget deck that was aggressive and did some weird stuff, where it was low cost evasives that if you weren't tuned for evasives at that point in the game, it really punished you. I think the big thing here is this has so much instant lore, and I think Ryan, you had talked about this the first time we saw this more this hyper aggressive Emerald Amethyst with Show Me More. It's it doesn't matter if my opponent has 15 cards in hand. If I hit 20 lore, then that's all that really matters. So you're like stuffing both players full of cards, knowing that you're just gonna like keep dropping down so many threats, like they just like can't keep up with it. And it's just kind of funny, like seeing these like really weak things like do well, you know, like to Ryan's point, right? There's hardly anything in here that costs more than 2 ink. So naturally everything's like a 1/1 or a 0/2. Like they can't fight for the board. They're just going for lore, and that's the only thing they care about. And lots of it really, really fast before the other player can like take a breath. That's really fun.
Yeah, and I would like to point out too that like mastery of a deck is far more important than what you following the meta, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like this very off meta Amethyst Emerald Hyper Aggro, like obviously this person took the time to master this deck no matter what other people were playing and other trends that we've seen. Another one that I noticed, and it was from another former Worlds participant and the first DLC winner from all the way back then in DLC Atlanta. His name's Joshua. He ran this Amber Sapphire deck that was really fun to watch. And it focused on, what's that action, guys, that just banishes and evasive?
The Horseman Strikes.
That's what it is. And like, I think that specific card is a huge player in that deck in order to combat the evasives that we see in the Amethyst color. I don't know. It was a fun deck to watch. I can't remember any specific play lines off the top of my head. A little bit of fog brain right now, but I would encourage people to try and catch out that part of the stream as well. It was a really fun deck to just watch because it's something that I have never practiced and never played against. And just watching someone really good at a deck with that level of mastery, it just goes to show that if you take the time to practice the deck you want and practice the combination you want, you can get really good at it and have success in a big tournament like this. So it was really cool. I'm really excited about the future state of the game. I know we've heard and alluded to some negative feelings over the turn of the new year a couple episodes ago, of which a lot of us don't agree with it, but we wanted to point out some of validity and maybe some of those points that people were feeling. But I think it just goes to show that one of our key kind of talking points over the course of our entire podcast is patience makes a difference in this game, whether it's waiting for cards or waiting for prices to drop or waiting for certain deck combinations to be good. Like it takes a while, especially in a TCG, for the meta to balance out, trends to shift, prices to change, so you're maybe a little bit more cost effective in specific cards that you're looking for. I think patience is a key trait that you need to like learn, and skill you need to learn in a TCG like this. And I'm very much a guilty party in that and learning that throughout my Lorcana career. But we're seeing that now. As frustrating as maybe Fabled was for a lot of people, it takes just one set and it takes a couple months for the meta to figure itself out. And here we are. We have 8 viable decks that could potentially win a DLC, or we didn't feel that way a couple months ago.
And I think, Mac, what's really refreshing about that too, what you just said, is that's kind of extrapolated my point from last weekend to a larger tournament, right? Like, yes, success will vary on a large tournament versus like local tournament, but I had said last weekend, right, that the top 8 was 7 different ink combinations, and that was really cool. It's cool to see that also carry over, where the top 64 isn't just a huge portion of like purple steel, blurple, and some amber steel, or maybe a couple dogs, and like that's it. It does seem like they're, to your point, like things are having success. It's widening, which is very healthy and good for the game. And I think that this point of like you mastering your own deck is still such a big deal, whether it's going at a big tournament or at the local level. Like, you know what maybe to stay away from and the cards that are going to do well. So, don't read too much into like, oh, wow, Emerald Sapphire is clearly the best. It was first and second, and bring it to your local set champs with a bunch of aggro players. Which to our point, we said, right, like there are some tools there to combat that, but it might not be it might not be as fun.
It's a slow deck. If you want to get 3 games in, don't play Emerald Sapphire. Just a small word of advice. I know how it feels, and it's really slow.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It does play very slow. Even if you're playing fast, it plays slow. I do want to call out a couple of Sapphire Steel lists that did make, top 32, since that is a new pet deck of one Mack. I have a specific question for you, though. I don't think I've seen this in your list yet, and I apologize if, we're getting into one of your secret friend tech options here. But the 7-cost uninkable Arthur. How do you feel about that fitting into the deck? And do you think there's a place for it? Do you think there's actually some value to it? Or do you feel like it's just like something that, like, kind of like the 8-cost uninkable Elsa in Amethyst or Blurple decks, where it's like, this is like a pet deck inclusion of they just can't get rid of this one specific card that they've had forever?
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and I have seen that in a couple lists. I haven't personally tested it, so I'll just throw that out there. But it is a 7-cost uninkable, and the thing that we see first and foremost with the Sapphire Steel list is that it runs a lot of uninkables. So bear in mind, this is just another uninkable to add to that pile. What I have been seeing, though, instead of running 4 Hades 7-cost uninkable, they run 3 Hades and 1 Arthur, so it's the same amount of uninkables at the same cost level. My assumption is people are playing it because I believe once it's played, you can give something +2 challenger, +2 resist, and they can challenge ready characters. It gives all 3 of those? My assumption is it's a way to combat evasives that are just standing ready on your opponent's board, and B, especially if you play that on a Tinkerbell, the Tinkerbell that you played the turn before that is now dry and that you can challenge this turn, it's kind of a quasi board wipe, or could be, with the Tinkerbell splash damage. So that's something that I have thought about as well. You could play that on Namari, who at that stage of the game could be really strong as well with the willpower. So that's my assumption, is a way to combat those evasive decks, or those decks that have a lot of readied board states that you just need to start chipping away at. I could see this being also effective against dogs, who tend to all stay ready, and then when they're all ready to go, they just quest for 1,000,000 at the very end. It could kind of stop that tempo as well with that Arthur play. But I could totally be speaking out of no man's land too. For those who have tested this, those are just my initial thoughts on why that Arthur would be important. And for those of you listeners who are Sapphire Steel players who have tested the Arthur, you won't hurt my feelings if my assumptions are wrong on how this Arthur is utilized. So please comment on either a video or send us a note, whether it's Instagram or one of our platforms, to give us your thoughts on why this Arthur is something that we've seen one of in the Sapphire Steel list. For me specifically, as I'm trying to test it and see how it goes, potentially at a set champs.
I also need to call out that this Arthur has clearly been lifting a lot, because if you've seen the Enchanted, the sword he is holding is absolutely massive. It's like a 2-handed broadsword, and he's just like 4-fingering it like it's nothing. So yeah, this dude's been hitting the gym, because wow, that's a huge sword. But what a great card to play and surprise some people with. That card's cool.
As a purple fan and evasive fan, I'm quaking in my boots at the play line of like an Ink Runner into a Cinderella into a Namari into a King Arthur, or an Arthur King Victorious on the next turn. Just like, oh, okay, cool. So nothing that I ever play gets to live now. Great, love it. This will be a lot of fun. I'm glad I get to, lose in such glorious fashion this turn.
Yeah, that's a good point. You bring out a good point. Just because you can give someone challenger and resist doesn't mean you can still attack evasives without the Ink Runner. And so that's one good thing to call out as well, is if you have an Ink Runner on board, make sure you have an additional ink to pay the cost to give someone alert, and then trigger all of those other additional effects that Arthur might give you. But if you're able to challenge something that isn't evasive but is still ready, to my previous point about Tinkerbell, you can then at least splash some damage on either an evasive, or what I've noticed, this stupid Cheshire Cat that no one ever wants to turn sideways. That's the card that I think has been surprising, or at least surprising me. I think it's kind of secretly the era of the Cheshire Cat, because we saw so many of those cards over DLC weekend. I think it's been a very much a favorite in all Amethyst decks, and why we've seen the Amethyst frustration that we've hinted to in previous episodes at the current state is just because there's a lot of like moving damage that you feel like you can't do anything against. But either way, you just gotta, the community, you learn to play around it, and other decks will find a way. So, but yeah, that cat has been very popular.
I
Those
think
poor Cheshire cats. 4 of in every purple deck, and just getting preyed upon by this Arthur King Victorious.
Yeah, I think one other card that I'm glad you guys brought it up that's been really interesting this set is that Ink Runner card, because I think one of the things that has historically held back a Sapphire Steel list is its inability to handle evasives. Like, sure, you could throw in a Lexington, last set or whatever. That's the set. Yeah, he's a gargoyle. But like Ink Runner just totally changes that, right? Where you can now really make someone think twice about turning that evasive sideways and kind of cheating out all that extra lore. I really like what Ravensburger's been doing with alert as a keyword. It does seem like a very direct response to Dumbo, if we're being totally transparent, because historically, right, it was like, oh, this gains evasive on your turn, right? Like that was sort of the version of that. But then when they realized that like that would give Dumbo like even more power, because now you could like do the Dumbo thing with the legendary Dumbo effect, versus now it's alert, which isn't the same thing as evasive on your turn, which means it's just getting the benefit of challenging into an evasive, not using Dumbo's card draw effect as well. So I think that's been really an interesting change that they've made. That is, it does matter, and it's showing up in cards like Ink Runner or the Steel, Lexington card, where it's like you get evasive challenging effects, but that's it. So just want to call out that's a really cool card, and I think for what it's worth, as not a Sapphire Steel specialist, but somebody who enjoys purple, I'm pretty scared of Ink Runner. It's a really good card. So if you're thinking about it in your list, I highly recommend you maybe throw 1 or 2 in there, because it can genuinely make the difference in some games.
We did see a lot of purple this weekend, and I do think Ink Runner was included in even some of the purple lists. I think there was a couple of blurple lists out there that had an Ink Runner floating around as well, just to establish even more evasive superiority or evasive interaction, to not get blown out by other purple decks that's happened to see more evasives than you. So I thought that was interesting for those inclusions as well. Well, DLC Richmond certainly was a blast to follow along with. It was incredible to see the high-level play on stream as they were going through it, the unique decks they showcased. You mentioned the Princess's Amber Sapphire deck. It seemed much less, the snippet I caught of it seemed much less Princess-esque and much more just Ludwig into Mowgli into Hyper Ramp somehow, to now all of a sudden they have 8 ink to your opponent's 4, and now you're playing 3 characters and you're saying, you can't deal with this many characters at once, so I'm going to win. Maybe it was just the snippet that I caught, and maybe it really truly does have a lot of Princess synergies. But nonetheless, a very interesting and unique deck, and so loved the casting team for bringing that to the forefront for the Lorcana community to be able to try to emulate that in the future. Looking forward to more Set Champs experiences this weekend, fellas. Are we all in? Are we all going to show up to the same Set Championships for the first time ever? Who's gonna crush the dream here? Who's gonna crush the dream?
I think it might actually happen. It might actually, all 5 of our friend group might make it to a Set Champs together, including all 3 of the DuckTale dads.
I'm trending in that direction. I think it's gonna work out for me. Very much excited to make it work, and we're going to a store that we've been there before, and they have a really fun community and really fun vibe there too. So I'm just excited to go back to that. Haven't been to a Set Champs since Set 7, so ready to get back to scratch that competitive itch for sure. But it should be fun. I'm very excited about just not only just because all of us are going to be there, whether or not I do well, just us hanging out and playing Lorcana. That's really the goal, right? So it's nice to have those competitive matches again and not just play testing online all the time. As much as I love play testing with you guys, we also talk about play lines, so it's not like the most competitive atmosphere. We're also trying to learn and feed off of each other. Now it's time to just kind of just put those learnings and findings into a competitive environment, and we'll see how it goes. So it'll be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to it. Am expecting a lot of friendly fire with our friend group. So we'll see how that goes, and I hope we're just not in a win and in stage where one of us has to go. That would be really sad, but I think it's inevitable that at least one of those will happen. So just accepting that we're still friends and the light is at the end of the tunnel, right? But no, all jokes aside, it'll still be fun regardless.
Yeah, I think anyone out there who has ever gone to a set champs with a friend or more than one friend knows just how real the team banishing can be at them, and how it feels very bittersweet when that happens.
Yeah, note to self, I better include my friend techs just in my deck, just to make sure I have those lined up and ready to go to combat what I think I'm going to see from y'all. Well, thanks for listening in. For everybody that's still tuned in with us, you can, as you know, you can find us on Spotify. We're on YouTube, so if you want to watch the actual video of us recording, that's there too. We're on Apple Podcasts as well. Feel free to engage with us through comments on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts, and we'll respond to them as we're able to. And again, we just love seeing y'all in public, so feel free to give us a shout, say hi if you see us out and about. And we're looking forward to all getting together at a set championships this weekend, hopefully. So without further ado, let's get the duck out of here.